Lesley, Mayne. Special thanks to her for collaborating in this webinar. She brings such sensitivity to this team, such skill as an Olympic qualifying runner to the discipline, and such humor to laugh at our own mistakes and take on new challenges, such as she sees purpose in seeing each child's potential and supporting and giving them the tools they need, and such delight in surprises that these children bring to herself and to others. Well, thank you for this sensitivity, these skills, and this sense of humor and delight. I learned just this week that a school lawyer even loves her. After 3 hours of grilling her, and then Lesley spending 30 hours in writing and rewriting the report, and then she had Lesley read all 9 pages of an individual education plan, and then Lesley writes the lawyer to thank you note for being such a good coach and making such a good case for the child. Well, no wonder the lawyer thinks she's the favorite speech language pathologist and the greatest, and unbiased and demanding source. That's what I call a triumph.
Hello, this is Dr. Mayne, and before I get to Sharon Rogers, first of all, thank you. She's the crown jewel of AAC. I want to give a special shout out to all of our AAC groupies who have followed us for most or all of our AbleNet webinars. We really appreciate your commitment and passion for what you do, and thank you for taking the time to listen to a bit of a compilation of our AAC experiences. So when I think about what stands out in my history of AAC working with Sharon Rogers is that she's always going to the source for her knowledge. She meets key leaders in AAC. She goes to the premier AAC conferences in the world. In turn, she presents her knowledge as well. She reads the books. She finds the articles, the bulletins, you name it. She's willing to consider new ideas and perspectives in AAC, and we'll share those today. She's an extraordinary role model and a gift, so just enjoy.
Thank you.
So here we are at Maximizing Participation. Congratulations. You're probably on summer break or like me starting summer school, and even if you're still working, embrace the difference, the breath of fresh air that promise of summer brings. So with that, let's take a look at what Janice Light brings to us again with the purposes of communication as they relate to maximizing participation. So what we see on the left-hand side of the screen are the 4 purposes of communication, and then on the right, they're linked to maximizing participation. The resource is at the bottom of this slide, and I think Janice Light does a great job of putting this together. And the priorities for communication are that social closeness for relationships, information transfer of ideas, the social etiquette, and then wants and needs to regulate others' behavior, which we've spoken about before as tending to dominate AAC. We want to really place that emphasis on the other 3 areas as well. So when we're looking at social closeness, we want to include that ability to give a compliment, to have maximizing responses, to practice emotion words. With information transfer, do you have words such as, that's not what I meant, that's not what I said? Are we talking about taking on more responsibility within the academic or even social setting to convey knowledge? Social etiquette, responding to social greetings. Now, we are talking about children, and children in general may not be the best responders, but it's still a great skill to teach as we're teaching all kids. And then wants and needs, that give and take, the bartering, the clarifying, I agree or I disagree. So what you might see in this stage is some or a lot of these messages may be expressed non-verbally, and while this is fine with familiar communication partners, I want you to consider that non-familiar communication partner. Would the person know what the child or adult is trying to express? And this is where you may tell the child, or maybe even an adult student, that this will be targeted in therapy to make sure he or she has as many ways, multimodal ways, to express themselves across a variety of people. So I know there's that tendency, oh, he can or she can express herself non-verbally, so she doesn't need that language, or the conversation just keeps going. Well, that's great and fine in that perspective, but just keep in mind we also want the individuals to have language available that they can use. Then we look at Janice Light's 4 competencies, which are different than the purposes, and I've referenced this as a great framework for developing your AAC plan. So linguistically, what are the areas of language that continue to need attention? Asking questions, access to the key vocabulary, syntax, vocabulary, maybe spelling that's tied to language, And again, negation, it isn't on there, but negation, the ability to say no in a variety of ways is an important skill for a child to have. And then operationally, it of course depends on the student. I have a student who's quite adept at his speech-generating device, but programming isn't really a part of his program at this point. It's not a weakness because he has plenty of other goals to work on, and he's becoming a very strong communicator. So for him, it's not necessary. So basically do what's right for each person. Just know for yourself, have I asked that question? What operational competencies would I like to see for this child? Socially, we added an email. It's a great way to build motivation to communicate, and it helps build spelling skills and the capitalization, organization, punctuation, spelling. And just socially, we're really looking at this person to be an active participant in discussions to the best of their ability, but just not, having that opportunity to be a contributing member. And then strategically, contributing to solutions. And then looking at physical positioning and using the right AAC tool in the right situation. I have 2 new developments that I'll talk to you about when we get to technology with, you never know, every week we learn in AAC, and I think that's just so fantastic. So I'll tell you about those. Since they are technology related, I'll save them for that time. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that while we've exposed you to Janice Light's 4 AAC competencies, 2 new competencies have been popping up. One is from Dr. Sarah Blackstone, who proposes that emotional competency should be added to the Great 4. Emotional competency reflects a developmental process wherein individuals learn to recognize, interpret, use, and respond to their own and others' emotions. So she is going to be coming out more and more with emotional competency research, so we can look forward to that in, I'd say, over this next year. And then Dr. Buchman proposes that another competency should be added, the internal dialogue, that ability to communicate with yourself. It helps people negotiate relationships, organize their activities and thoughts, reduce stress, to learn, to create, and self-actualize. So it's just food for thought with these 2 additional competencies.
The goal of maximizing participation is certainly for each child to play the role that enhances his or her own self-esteem and contributions to others. Participation in activities leads to a sense of belonging and enjoying a quality of life. The children with complex communication needs understand the purpose and meaning of each activity and are appreciated for their individual self-contributions that they can make. Maximizing is both social and academic, using AAC in a continual process as the child grows and expands his or her language. The children contribute to others. They give back to their communities. We want them to be fluent readers, writers, and thinkers with other children. And finally, the scope of maximizing participation is to enjoy efficient and skillful multimodal communication understood by communication partners across environments. Our friend Joanne Cafiero summarized the goal as SNUG. The goal of maximizing participation is they can say anything about anything at any time. That's spontaneous, novel, utterance generation. We're glad for that way to sum it all up. We apologize that this slide might be slightly blurry, but the 2 in the front are participating using their speech-generating devices. The guy with the baseball cap on sideways has a switch by his left cheek. They look like they're doing a role play using their devices, and they're thoroughly enjoyed communicating with each other and with their audience. No wonder their hands are joined to take a bow while the person behind them acknowledges their contribution. Just a quick review of the parts of our maximizing participation: social interaction, communication skills and activities, what facilitators can do to support the children, and encouraging and supporting reading and writing to develop language, expanding vocabulary in meaningful ways using tools and access to AAC, and knowing that others have had the same trouble and find solutions together helps. We know that in maximizing participation, some conversations can be private and whispers, or others can be out loud, and they can be written or spoken. It involves listening, speaking, reading, and writing using AAC. So participation brings the smiles and the attention that engages each one of us.
So here we are with social interaction. When we're talking about responsibility within an activity, we're saying for the child to be an active participant to the best of their ability. Be an active member of the situation in which you are present. In addition to giving and receiving compliments, talk about other people. For example, if you introduce yourself and say 2 things about yourself. Now, introduce me and say 2 things about me, or a peer, or what you observe, etc. So then consider the optimal way to navigate varying language needs across formal and informal settings, private conversations such as home language, school language, community experience, and then explicitly teach the child how to keep a conversation going. If it switches, the child can say, wait, I have something to say about that. I love this slide that says, believe in yourself so strongly that the world has no option but to believe in you too. How fantastic is that? And that's what we want. We want that level of engagement to be occurring.
We see here that maximizing participation, the AAC user now takes the attention and time to monitor and interpret his communication partner's meaning as expressed in words and gestures and voice. And using the AAC device more easily, the child asks important questions for sharing information and giving opinions. Their attention moves toward fulfilling more complex roles as they wait their turn and know how to use their pauses. Sometimes finding a humorous way to strengthen relationships and make others laugh about a situation becomes a strategy for AAC users who are maximizing their participation. Looks like a place where everyone participates in this slide from AbleNet. I'm reminded of Gordon, another friend who uses a light writer for all of his communication activities. He organizes his friends, also in wheelchairs, into basketball teams, goes on whitewater rafting trips, enjoys cruises, arranges for his own housing, and attendance applies for jobs. His independence has been his and his family's goal from full inclusion classes in elementary school all the way to graduating from California State University, Los Angeles. A person with cerebral palsy, he spoke as an AAC user to our communication disorders class. And he's been such a user, he's donated his first communication device to our college AAC lab for its historic sake.
So now we're taking a look at some communication skills and activities, and we're talking about participation in school plays, sleepovers, yearbook writing, sports teams, and then also recognizing what is expected of and appreciate the contributions of community helpers, the coaches, the librarians, and medical personnel. So again, we're talking about maximizing participation, really getting the child into the community, into the functions of school, and typically developing activities. So we want that exposure. So the child needs to be exposed to expectations that will be placed on him or her within the community, and in addition, the child needs to know that the community workers are helping, and practice, if at all, practice to expose the child to changes, especially for doctor-related appointments. So things that are new, you just want to expose them to that. In addition, you want to expose that community worker to what the child's communication preferences are, ways of communicating, behavioral considerations, so that they know too. So one family I know uses dental care every other year, and the child is put to sleep for the process. And then all the doctors will have been coordinated and contacted, and then all the testing is done all at once just to help the child be able to manage that situation the best. But it took a tremendous amount of planning on the parent's part, but well worth it for the benefit of the child. But what I wanted to point out from this is the experience with the community workers were that they came back and said, okay, well, let's have him come into the office in 6 months so we can continue to desensitize him. And the family was just thrilled that we knew that this dentist had never used that word before, but he had learned and he had wanted to try. And so we do, while we're talking about exposing a child to the community in these activities, keep in mind that we probably are going to have to do some training with the community workers as well. So here we are, planning projects with others, and I started to think about this, and most of the time, there is no planning with kids, or there is, but it merges through a chaos of language and toys that, in the end, emerges in activity. But this is what makes play hard on kids, especially with autism. And one idea is to choose an activity that seems like that good reach. I know a teacher who decided that one child would be in charge of the class birthdays. So they made a template, and it had the questions written down for what the child would ask the birthday boy or girl what they would want to drink, or what fruit they would want, or cracker or cheese. And then they would indicate, is this themed for a boy or a girl? How old will he or she be? What supplies are needed? And this allowed this child to participate in a classroom experience that they hadn't done before, and gave them a sense of control that they could be a part of the situation. And it's been very successful so far. So it's just an idea. We talked about email a little bit, and of course, all forms of social media should be carefully monitored. But finding groups of kids that the child can connect with isn't necessarily a bad idea. You can investigate state and national associations related with the child's disability and look for opportunities for kids to connect. Book clubs is another opportunity. More schools are starting to have the book club option, where there's a certain level of required reading, but maybe if you participate in this club, you can be held less accountable for the mass amount of pages that have to be read. And for a child with AAC, you can have questions that are prepared that can help guide the vocabulary programming needs for the parents, generate questions that would have choices to answer those questions, and just help, again, with that engagement level. We're talking about information transfer, social engagement. This could be a good thing to do. And then finally, we talk about preferred places and activities, and this is a nice opportunity to put remnant books together. It's summertime. Chances are families might be doing some different activities that they're not doing during the school year. Have them collect the brochures and take a few pictures. They can relate with other children by showing them, and now there's a joint reference, a joint conversational stepping off point for kids to connect.
Maximizing participation involves facilitator strategies. You see here, no adults allowed unless accompanied by children. You see the little guy in the top right-hand corner. He has some opinions from his wheelchair as to what responsibility he wants to take in getting his assignments done, and he understands what other children are doing and wants to do the same thing often. A student of ours who had a progressive form of muscular dystrophy participated with maximum support with peers and family. She decided to write for her school yearbook because she said she wanted to give back to the community. Her nurse told me, I could go around the world 6 times, take every university course, and not learn as much about life and about God as I have from being with Joy. So children with complex physical and communication needs know their facilitators, who in turn make sure that they have maximum participation in everyday activities. We know that you already know the facilitator strategies will be different now in maximizing participation, and the students get more and more independence. When children are maximizing their participation, they generate, again, that spontaneous novel utterances with their communication partners. Some partners may need a card like Rich Hone, an AAC user, gave us a few suggestions. He indicates that what he needs to know in quick phrases programmed on his device. And with some, he suggests, you can speak personally to me instead of to the person who's with me. Though I cannot speak like you, I fully comprehend everything you say and can answer back. You see, my brain still works. Or, feel free to look over my shoulder and read my message. Reading may save us some time. And he may even add, I want to tell you something in private. Please read my screen while I tell you. So these are facilitator strategies to solve problems that may work at home and at the office. More facilitator strategies would be the facilitator to discuss with the AAC users different uses of language with different partners, different motives and means of communication, cultural exchanges. Of course, discussing the difference between fact and fiction and the way they're expressed is yet another topic. As discussing complex opinions, we listen to Stephen Hawking, a maximum participant across multiple people, disciplines, and cultures. Stephen Hawking, the British theoretical mathematical physicist, is a cosmologist who studied at a nearby university even after he was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS. He's a person who uses AAC operating using his cheek to arrange travel to the Antarctic. He studies black holes and writes about the universe for fellow citizens and scientists and the public. Hundreds of us, like us, line up for hours to hear him speak. At the bottom of the page, the bottom of this slide, you see the reference to Stephen Hawking's mother. She said, he's contributed so much more with this disease, because otherwise he probably just would have been a party animal. So we appreciate what he's been able to contribute. His answers may take 20 minutes to construct, but everyone knows that he'll be able to point them in the right direction. This is maximum participation using AAC. By the way, Hawking went to get his hair cut in this nearby city, and the beautician asked him what he did for a living. And so he said with his speech-generating device that he was a cosmologist. And she's thinking of a cosmetologist, said, I am too, thinking that she'd heard that word that she knew and about studying hair and makeup and nails. Well, they had to get that straightened out before they could get on with the haircut. Discovering the difference in proceeding was what was a necessary way for him to participate.
There's a little communication breakdown.
Yeah, big time.
All right, so here we are with literacy skills. Says, I'm not addicted to reading. I can quit as soon as I finish one more chapter. Well, there is our goal with maximizing communication. I know a few kids who, when they're in trouble, the parents will say, if you don't do X, Y, Z, I'm going to take your book away. Pleasure reading is addictive, so we want to find what inspires. If you're at that point of figuring out where does that start, is it a series? Some kids like the predictability of knowing the characters or the structure of the story, so series really work. It could be seeing the movie when the movie comes out in the theater or seeing it on DVD. That might be a nice motivating way to encourage some literacy skills and getting engaged in reading. Is it making new books? Is it making a new iPad book? Is it starting with mini books?
Literacy development is in a great set. Decoding, attaching the code to letters and making them into words, understanding vocabulary and sentence structures and text structures, narrative, persuasive, exposition. And then the child needs to activate and apply world knowledge to the text and use these metacognitive skills to monitor comprehension. Have students read stories silently, using their inner language. Summaries are good places to check for comprehension. Have the child read the text independently and then answer multiple choice questions to answer why questions. Writing communication uses a wider range of vocabulary and more complex sentence structures, so we want the children to be writing, to be reading, as the two complement each other so well. These are important. The more we read, the more language we have, and we have exposed to. And signing your name with an electronic signature is a new special talent. And here this is a micro again of learning to spell, like you did in getting started. But we see that visual supports are sometimes really handy for kids at the beginning stages of spelling their own name or spelling a song, the name of bingo to the song. On the right, we see a way that they could use the PCP pipes and construction paper to facilitate the child's spelling by looking at the display, then having the facilitator indicate which position the letter is in, left, middle, right, below left, below right. And thinking of this from the tools perspective, not everything needs to be high-tech, but don't forget to address spelling. The listserv from ASHA last Saturday, a woman, Tanya Rose Curtis, posted that kids who learn to write first become better readers. She said, writing is a great way to teach nonverbal children to communicate. While there are many vocabulary strategies we can offer, when we offer nonverbal children only whole words to work with, we bypass the normal developmental sequence children go through when learning to write. They learn to write, they'll also learn to read, and they'll possess the generative language capabilities that are needed to truly independent communicators.
And we had a comment from a viewer who said that, speaking of the not just using high tech, but that she had made a small book that had the child's interests and problems and how to know if frustrations were occurring. And that is absolutely right. You want to have not just the high tech. If the batteries die, how are you going to communicate? Mm-hmm. So you do need these low tech options just as well as some of the high tech options, such as PECs. It was another comment that families may not want to head towards just a picture-based system or a handheld system, and it's something to consider. You need to have multimodal ways to communicate. So thank you for those comments.
Mm-hmm. Narratives, retell a story is a way to develop language. And again, there was a presentation at the ASHA conference 2012 where they had the facilitator write down what the person was talking about. They simply wrote what the child said using conventional adult spelling. And in the experimental group, they modeled writing in the child form, 1 or 2 stages above where most of the kids were performing, followed by the adult model as well. It went something like, someone who's just learning to write might write that this way with the initial letters or final letters. And then they wrote the model using the first letter of each word and using the first and last letter only. Or they used the CVC, the consonant vowel consonant sequence, to represent the words. Then they show how an adult would write the same thing. And their findings showed that the kids exposed to developmental modeling made faster gains in writing than kids who were only given adult models. I wish I'd gone to that session too. But these are even good ways to develop the narrative ability of kids. We love this slide. As you can see, here's a 3rd grader using a speech-generating device to participate in a reader's theater production of The 3 Little Elephants, as a takeoff of The 3 Little Pigs, right? Her costume is the big bad mouse instead of the big bad wolf, and the elephant ears and trunk on the other girl sets the tone. I only regret that the last line on this says that Reed's assistant suggests Reed suffers because of cerebral palsy, when Hannah seems happy enough at participating in this activity. She's fully engaged, learning and interacting with peers.
Here is a way to develop some of the story grammar, some of the narrative development we've been talking about. These are stages 4 through 7 of the Mind Wing Song story grammar. Stages 1 through 3 were reviewed in our last webinar. So you don't have to use this model, but we thought it might be a way to help encourage maximizing participation in telling stories and retelling stories. So the abbreviated episodes focus on the emotional cause and effect, those happy, sad, mad, surprised, disgusted, afraid kind of words. The complete episode recognizes and attempts to accomplish that plan. So it involves the critical thinking, managing some of those tricky components of our figurative language. And narratives help us see ourselves and our culture with new perspectives. According to Roger Schenck, we live in a world of stories. And he discusses this in his book, Tell Me a Story. And he says, our ability to utilize these stories in novel ways is the hallmark of what we consider to be intelligence. And I like this because traditionally we've thought of intelligence as just whatever that score is on that standardized test. And I think we know now that there's a lot more to intelligence. So AAC users need to find ways to demonstrate their intelligence and tell their story. So this is just one way to do it.
One of our participants suggested listening to an audiobook is a wonderful way to hear for kids to enjoy stories together.
Absolutely.
And another said that she has a Big Mac that she uses to help kids participate in the Reader's Theater.
Oh, that's fantastic. And here is story retell, Charlotte's Web, from the perspective of the main characters. We have Wilbur, Charlotte, Templeton, with their attributes connected with graphics and words. So pictures are a visual stimulus that children can use to organize their thoughts to create a pattern for writing. Light, McNaughton, and Buchelman and Miranda suggest the plan, write, edit, so to support writing. Writing strategies begin with a plan. We pay attention to the prompt, list the main ideas, add supporting ideas, and number the ideas. Then we write. We remember what our goals are, including transition words for a paragraph, trying to use different kinds of sentences, that are exciting and interesting and having those $10,000 words. And then we need to edit. Enter your first draft, do a spell check, interrogate yourself about the capitalization, punctuation, spelling, and organization, and know that writing is a process, and it's a healthy one at that. Here is another sample of Joy, who used AAC for her topic on historical periods in social studies. That's organized by political events, literature, influential people, human rights, exploration, and inventions. Now, that's a lot. Wow. Can't you just see a sixth grader using this organizer to write about the early colonial period?
Maximizing participation for Sue Rubin culminated in her graduation from Whittier College in 2013. The psychologist told Sue's family that when she was in elementary school that she just had an IQ of 27. But however, once Sue learned to type her thoughts and learn language, they decided that she had a lot more to use, and they all had to revise their thinking about Sue and her participation. She tells us her thinking has changed once she had language. So she wants to be the Cesar Chavez of the AAC community by using her writings. Her documentary, Autism is a World, was an Academy Award nominated film documentary that she had produced. So this is maximizing participation. She still needed a hand to guide her across the stage, and still with a diagnosis of autism, but she majored in philosophy and political science on a Westinghouse scholarship. We're glad for her participation. Now, maximizing participation, according to this T-shirt, is I have a vocabulary of 75,000 words, and I'm not afraid to use them. Well, 75,000 is slightly more than the 50,000 words typical persons have and use. Typical children, according to Judy Montgomery, add about 3,000 to 4,000 words a year. So authorities suggest that 50,000, what we understand, but Shakespeare really only used 29. So having access to vocabulary matters. I was in a recent individualized education program meeting, and I suggested that this alert second grade learn 200 words this year using AAC. Imagine my surprise when 100 was the goal. If a typical child has 3,000 to 4,000 new words a year, that really puts him at a handicap. But expectations matter. And Rich Holm, a literate AAC user who's also an artist and a public speaker and a preacher, has access to Gateway Pro for efficient access to core words, keyboard, and he uses character and morphological prediction to enhance the rate of message generation. He has stored messages that start and phrase builders to reduce the time it takes to compose novel messages. Here we have a recent manuscript I was reading for Communication Disorders Quarterly cited a study where a toddler who was between 2 and 3 had gained 25 words in 12 sessions by repeating it 10 times during a play session with each of the children. And they used an augmentative input where the facilitator was able to point to the picture or the icon, the thing on the speech-generating device or a communication board, which made a much better result in the child being able to use the word than just saying the word in the context of the play session. The communicator used it 10 times in every session, and that had a wonderful result. It was a small study, but the results are very encouraging. A 50% increase in vocabulary in 8 sessions is a wonderful one.
So here we're looking at vocabulary, just pretty much a review. We have looking at complex language or complex sentence structures, such as creating compound sentences with independent clauses, the use of adverbial conjunction or complex sentences with dependent markers, if, until, when, where, although, while, and relative pronouns such as who, whose, whatever, sometimes, and whoever. So these are just some ideas for generating those complex language opportunities. And we still want that ease with familiar small talk, choosing and programming age-appropriate stories and jokes. Remember, jokes are your nice way in across all stages of AAC to help kids relate to other people who may be less familiar with someone who uses AAC. Having the repair strategies, having words to express positive and negative emotions, and remember, practicing that social etiquette, and then maybe even word searches, word games to build vocabulary. Now we're going to take a look at tools and access. Here we're looking at the AbleNet PowerLink, which is a really lovely looking little tool. It's really come a long way from its original development. So the PowerLink holds up to controls up to 2 appliances at one time, works with the wired and wireless switches, and has 6 modes of control. It's great too for participation with making toys work and cooking, running blenders, electronics to manage lights, televisions, etc. So I told you that I had 2 new developments this week early on. I had one child use an AbleNet candy corn proximity switch, and one child use an iPad with tactile cues in addition to using his speech-generating device. So I had just tried this new candy corn proximity switch, which I really, really like. The child gets close to the switch and it activates rather than just the traditional depressing of the switch for a child with motor impairments. And it also has a tone that lets the child know that they've activated the switch. It doesn't continually activate the switch. It just, the tone lets them know you've done it and now you need to move away. And at first I wasn't sure about the tone, but I really like it because otherwise it was me always saying, okay, you've depressed the switch, hand to your lap or hand to your shoulder, whatever the position was. And now I can cue him to that tone, say, listen to what you hear. Okay, where does your hand need to go? So it's a nice little transition tone, and I'm really excited about it. Then I had another little guy who was really kind of relying on a speech-generating device, and we went to the iPad to do some more traditional typing. And we found that while he was doing very, very well with the icons, going to traditional typing helped him access sometimes when he was having word-finding issues. And it was a nice little breakthrough. It's really exciting to see. Again, multimodal, trying different things when something tends to get in your way.
Okay.
Now we're going to take a look at some mastery questions and considerations. So when we're dealing with technology, keep on asking good questions that maximize efficient use of communication tools, the symbol system, the access method, the hardware, and the software. You can always expect gains in a couple different areas, the child's skill level and then the advancements in technology that are always coming. So just keep your eye out and your ear out for all these great advancements, both for the children and technology. And you want to foster that expanded vocabulary and language opportunities from mastering literacy, that fluency of the AAC tool use, and that flexible multimodal communication for participation. You want to consider, is the mixing of symbols okay at this point or not? You might have that when we're maximizing communication. Or do you still need to stick with one symbol type? Is there a preferred way of language expression within an utterance? So again, just this week with those word-finding moments, when the icons weren't quite working, going to traditional spelling was the way to go, and then he went back to using his icons. So get that flip-flop going. Get whatever works working. So now we're going to take a look at some technology and what we like about tablet technology and then some of the considerations. We know it's a fantastic addition to our toolkit. We know that it's a lot more socially acceptable. We know it can be affordable compared to traditional programs and that the apps are much more inexpensive. And we know that we have now academic and communication features that really are great, and no longer is it just an AAC tool. It can be an educational tool as well. Some considerations as to whether it's the right tool or not are the following. Consider it disposable. It's going to work for a while, and then the next latest greatest is going to come out, or it's going to wear out, or it's going to get dropped, or there's a lot of things that wear and tear that you have to keep in mind. Does the user have the cognitive and refined motor ability to manipulate the small buttons to regulate the controls for brightness, for audio, for on-off, etc.? Will my user drop or throw this device? What is the degree of concern that the user or others incidentally, accidentally, or quite on purpose will damage the ID? Do you have a protective case and positioning mounts or stands that are durable enough for the user that might be dealing with impulsivity, ataxia, a heavy-handed user? And then what you gain in stability are you now losing in the weight or awkwardness of the stands or mounts? So you've got to really weigh these. And then also from an audio perspective, is the ambient noise, environmental noise, is audio enough for the user? And does the user have the ability to touch accurately, or are the frame guards of traditional communications more appropriate? However, new key guards are coming out for the iPads, so you can keep an eye on that. So it is making it better. And the goal of AAC is about the message, not hitting buttons. Can the user be successful with the stylus? Right now, there's not any readily adapted styluses, but if you're using some wrist guards and some splints or cuffs, handcuffs, like from your occupational therapist, you can modify them and it can work out quite well. A few more consideration is transportability. How will my user carry the device and use it for quick communication? There are now more features like belts and things like that that you can buy, but just consider that. How is it going to be carried? The wheelchair mount, we don't know what the damage is to the device while in motion, so you want to consider that. Environmentally, brightness. Will the screen brightness on the iPad be appropriate for the user, both inside and outside? And safety. Will the use of an iPad place the user with disabilities in danger of being robbed or physically harmed in any way? It's just something to consider. And then final considerations, what's the social impact on the user? For example, an elementary school student may not wait around for a user to hit 6 buttons to say a message, but high school students and tech-savvy adults may be more invested in the interaction. So you just want to be careful with what is the best way, fastest way, efficient way for a student to get their communication. You want to train that social interaction skill along with the use of tablet technology. I think with all of our AAC we need to do that. So if you're creating a message, turn and look at the speaker. Or I'm actually having a little guy that I work with turn his communication device as well so the communication partner can read as well as hear the message. Considerations from time. How fast is your user? Are we losing our listener with the amount of time it takes? Are the symbol sets or icons, images appropriate for the user? Because oftentimes, well, I think guaranteed, when you're buying an app, it comes with the symbols, and those can't be changed, so you want to be careful with what is the most appropriate there. Technology, the tablet technology is not considered durable medical equipment, so from a funding perspective, that changes things. And then be careful of apps that are free with limited access that might require monthly fees or fees for in-app purchases. And then for tools and access, does the child have the easiest access to her speech-generating device? Now, this is going back to everything. You're now going to ask yourself, okay, what is the easiest way for my child to access his or her speech-generating device? Do I need to consider new access methods? What's the backup plan or solution when the speech-generating device isn't working? Do you have one? Do you have copies of pages? Is there a better way for the child to communicate? Again, we're looking at expecting gains in cognition, motor skills, and social development, including language. And we're targeting increased fluency of messages and involving other communication partners, such as the community workers that we talked about before. So this page has a lot of AAC device considerations on it, and I know the font size is small, but we wanted this information to be on one page for you. There's a link included at the bottom right from the University of Nebraska Lincoln website that has AAC vendor information on it, and there are a lot of AAC links that may be accessed. So when you're going through that process of what speech-generating device or what AAC tool in general should I be looking for, this is a nice little list for you to consider. So, maximizing participation, troubleshooting. Due to recent budget cuts, the light at the end of the tunnel has been turned off. Well, we definitely need to deal with troubleshooting, and I decided with this particular problem, if they had an AbleNet power link, this wouldn't be a problem. Hooray for AAC, here to save the day. So, here we are. When we're troubleshooting, is the breakdown due to language? Because vocabulary is not available? Is there a way you can make finding words easier? And that would be, again, through your multimodal way. It could be through the organization of language. Are we talking about pictures? Are we talking about written language? Are we talking about pictures, icons? Operationally, does a child know how the device works and how it's maintained? What additional access or supports does the child need? And again, we talked about that may not be relevant to the child at this time. It may be perfectly relevant because that's the stage the child's at. It all depends. Socially, what's working well? What barriers still exist? We need to brainstorm with the child about appropriate solutions, and then strategically encouraging the child to use his or her own voice and eyes as well, and figure out what causes those breakdowns so you can go back and find the best solution.
Well, we did have to bring up the funding issue, which is always often a trouble for many of the kids who use AAC and for their families and the school. We recommend going to that website of AAC, RARC, which is called AAC Funding Help, all one word, .com. We look for funding to come from government sources, Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, local education agencies, and private sources, independent insurance companies. We want to make sure the reports are written correctly to get that funding as a medical necessity or a free appropriate public education. For some, you need the physician and the speech pathologist report and results of trials across at least 3 speech-generating devices. I like Pamela Massey's report coach, which is also on aacfundinghelp.com, which is a template that you can use to guide your report writing. And vendors also help the purchasers once you've decided to write that report.
So fresh off the press are these pointers in Troubleshooting by Carole Zangari of Nova Southeastern University. These are 5 things not to say to AAC learners. 1, show me on your device. Instead, build language of communication with directives such as tell me or say it. 2, press the switch. Instead, refer to the function that the switch is being used for. For example, make it go. Tell me on your talker. If they tell you one way and you understand the message, celebrate, reward, encourage. If you make them repeat themselves using a different strategy, they may come to view communication using AAC as a chore, and that's not the best motivation.
Oh, no.
I know you can do it. You did it yesterday. You're just being stubborn. Oh, my goodness. There are lots of good reasons for inconsistency, but even that wasn't so. There's no room for calling someone stubborn in a professional context, so let's just avoid that one. And then hurry up. No, just wait. So here we are at our final conclusion here, almost. We have a couple more slides to show you. So it's been a real pleasure to speak with you for all of these past 5 hours of AAC, meaning the past 5 webinars. Keep up the great work with AAC for the benefit all communicating together. Thank you very much.
Yeah, these basketball players didn't get to be on the U.S. team just by suiting up and holding a ball. They needed that coach who was sensitive, who was skilled, who was disciplined, who was humorous, who was purposeful, and who delighted in making sure that they had the support and the encouragement and the role model that teaching strategies support. Here's the story that maybe many of you have heard about making a difference. An old man was walking up a shore littered with thousands of starfish, beached and dying after a storm. A young man was picking them up and flinging them back into the ocean. "Why do you bother?" the old man scoffed. "You're not saving enough to make a difference." The young man picked up yet another starfish and sent it spinning back to the water. "Made a difference to that one," he said. So let's keep doing that. Michael Williams, an AAC user, wrote, "Reach for the stars. These are the starfish. Participation's a guiding principle for the next 25 years." After this session is over, keep your browser window open, and a short survey will appear on your screen. Your opinion matters to AbleNet, so please take a moment to complete that survey. AbleNet's proud to offer webinar sessions dedicated to professional development, offerings that keep you up to date on emerging assistive technology and curricular solutions. So look for those listings and emails, or visit the AbleNet University website to see the schedule of upcoming live professional development sessions. And don't forget about the vast variety of recorded, archived seminars. I invite you to like AbleNet on Facebook and follow AbleNet on Twitter for all the latest, including updates on this development and other products and promotions. Please don't close your browser quite yet. short survey will pop up. I ask that you kindly take a moment to complete it. It's automatically submit when you are done. Well, thanks for your time and your interest, and keep those AAC networks going. I return our webinar to Mark at Ready Talk. Thanks again for being part of this.